and welcome YouTube. This is Electrode's Gaming Center, and I just wanted to pop in and make a video about a new discovery I came across. I've been experimenting a lot with older games, just been kind of in that big old retro gaming kind of thing right now. Actually managed to get a hold of Rollcage and Rollcage Stage II for PC on CD, and I didn't realize at first that there was actually updated versions of these games that you can directly download, made by codemonkey. Codemonkey is actually one of the original developers for Rollcage and Rollcage Stage II, and he made some updated versions known as Rollcage Redux for the first Rollcage, and Rollcage Extreme, which is an updated version of Rollcage Stage II. He also was a big developer for the new 2018 racing game Grip, which is basically an updated version of Rollcage built on the Unreal Engine, and it's actually a really cool game, so if you haven't checked it out, I do highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of Rollcage. It's absolutely awesome. But anyway, this video is actually about something different. If you look here on the blog post for codemonkey, you can actually see that there's some logs for updated versions of the game as he's been implementing them, at least before 2015. But here on version 1.36, it says to bring back the old times cheat code toggles the PlayStation version CD music track indexing. Why is this important? Well, if you didn't know already, the PC and PlayStation versions of Rollcage actually had completely different soundtracks, and this case is also the case for Rollcage Stage II. The PlayStation version of Rollcage actually features licensed soundtracks from licensed artists, which include artists like Fatboy Slim, Easy Rollers, Aphrodite, and etc., whereas the PC version has its own entirely composed soundtrack by one of the developers within Psygnosis, who composed the soundtrack specifically for the PC version. Well, with the Rollcage Redux actually existing, we can actually use this cheat code to inject the PlayStation version's music into the PC version of the game and play the PC version of Rollcage Redux, which is the only version, with the PlayStation soundtrack. That's what this video is going to be about. So in order to get started, I want you to open up your Rollcage Redux, or Redo, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but I'm past the point of trying to pronounce things correctly. So we're just going to go with Redux. Go into Redux, go into your IDX data folder within your Rollcage Redux directory. Go within the music track folder of that directory and open this up. Once you're in that folder, you should see one music.m3u file, and then 9 CD track files starting with CD track 02 and ending in CD track 10. These are OGG versions of the PC soundtrack of the game directly injected into the game, and therefore we can also control the volume of these individual soundtracks through this way as well. This is important to know, as this is how we will be injecting the PlayStation version of soundtrack into this game. Now, before we go into the actual part, this is assuming that you have an original PlayStation copy of Rollcage and Rollcage Stage II on hand. I'm not going to tell you where to get it, and I'm not advocating for piracy in this video. This is just mostly a tutorial for how to inject the PlayStation version CD music into the PC version. Now that we got that cleared up, what I want you to do is rip the PlayStation CD music onto your computer. Windows Media Player can do this quite easily. This isn't Rollcage. Here, this is actually a different game soundtrack I have injected, but you can use Windows Media Player to rip this soundtrack directly to your PC. When I use the Windows Media Player, I want to go into RIP settings and go under format and make sure it's set to wave lossless. That way we can rip the soundtrack directly to the PC in as high quality as possible. And then once we convert it from that to the correct format, we can ensure that minimal audio quality is lost. So go ahead and make sure you rip the PlayStation soundtrack to your PC through the WAV format. If you have another audio application you prefer to rip soundtracks through, feel free to use that. Just use Windows Media Player here for ease sake. Once that's done, we can go ahead and find the folder where you ripped it. Here I have all of the PlayStation version soundtrack in WAV format. Now, before we actually inject these soundtracks into Rollcage Redux, we need to convert them to OGG format. One particular application that I like to use for this is Audacity. If you haven't heard of Audacity, I'd be quite surprised, but it is a free audio editing program that you can download and install onto your computer. Here I'm using version 2.3.3, so just so you're aware, there's a specific tool within here that we can use for this. Now, normally what we could do is just open the WAV file and wait for it to load and go to export and export it as an OGG and save it and blah blah blah. And while you can convert each WAV file into OGG like this, it's quite redundant. And so there's actually a much faster way for this to be done. Before we actually get into creating a macro inside of Audacity to process multiple OGG files at once, I just wanted to go ahead and make a quick note. It would be best to open one of the WAV files first and then go under File, Export, and then click Export as OGG. When you do that, you will see a slider at the bottom of the export window that says from 0 to 10, and it should probably be set to 5 as default. If you want to make sure that your OGG files are set to maximum quality, I ensure that you set that slider all the way up to 10. The OGG files that will result from it will be about 12-15 megabytes per file at max, and this will ensure that you have maximum audio quality for each OGG file you export so that you aren't dealing with lack of quality due to lower bit rates. So what you can do is open Audacity, go into Tools, and then click Macros. Here in Macros, we actually have various chains that we can apply that we can use when we're doing batch editing, which is when we affect multiple files at once. So in order to do this, we're going to go ahead and click New and name it something on the likes of OGG conversion. And once we have this new macro created, it'll just have one that says end, which means that's the end of the commands list. You want to go to Insert, and then you'll want to scroll all the way to the right, and you'll see something called Export as OGG. Yes, we can convert them to MP3s as well and use the index for M3 like that. However, the soundtracks for the PC version of Rollcage Redux are already in OGG format, so we're just going to stick for OGG format for the case of this video. Now, select Export as OGG, and within your OGG conversion macro, you'll see 1, Export as OGG, and then 0 to end. This is all you have to do for this chain. That's basic. And then we can, I'm stumbling over all of my words here, but then we can click Files, and then we can select all of the soundtracks from the PlayStation version of the game and open them. That way, with this whole process, we can individually convert each WAV file to OGG file and have the program just go through all of the files at once without having to import and export, and therefore avoid the redundancy of that process. So we're going to go ahead and wait for this to get done. So now that we're done with that, go back into the folder where you originally ripped the WAV files for this, for the PlayStation version soundtrack. In that folder, you should see a new folder that says macro-output. If you double click on that, you'll open a new folder. And in this folder should be the entire soundtrack converted to OGG format. If we right click and go to properties, we can see here that it says .ogg, OGG audio file. So we're good there. Now before we get to the next step of injecting it, I like to rename all of these files appropriately so I can differentiate them between this soundtrack and the PC version soundtrack. I'm going to go ahead and do something along the lines of PS track 02 and 03 and so forth. And why I start off with track 02 is that with enhanced audio CDs, with a lot of PlayStation games, they actually had the game on the disc and then used the audio portion of it to put CD audio into the game. And for the game to recognize the audio track, actually specifies track 02 as the first audio track within the game, as track 01 is actually the data track for whatever game that you're playing. Let me go ahead and rename all of these files and I'll get back to you real quick. Alright, so once that's done, each of your tracks should be labeled PS Track 02 all the way down to PS Track 16. Now that this is done, you can highlight all of these files, right click and click copy, and go to where your Rollcage Redux music directory is through IDX data, music tracks, and then directly paste all of those PlayStation tracks here. That way we know exactly which tracks are for the PlayStation version and which tracks are for the PC version. Now, the next step is to see this music.m3u file. I want you to copy it and paste it. Then name it something along the lines of music_PC. That way we have a backup of this m3u file with the index for these tracks right here. Now we can open the music.m3u file right here. Open this version, as it will only look for music.m3u when it's looking for the index, and open it up. Now here in Notepad++, we have all of the index for each of the individual CD tracks. We want to replace it with all of the ones here for PS Track 02 for PS Track 16. That's what I'm going to go ahead and do right now. So be back in just a moment. Alright, now that that's done, we can see here I have PS Track 02 all the way down to PS Track 16. I did put one more indent here with a blank line, just because it was like that with the original index, and we don't want to run into some weird issues that could occur, so we'll just do that for ease sake. Better be safe than sorry. Now, this is pretty much it, but there's one last step that we have to do. If we were to save this file as it is, go in and input the cheat code, something would be quite off. You see, the PC version's menu soundtrack is actually CD Track 02. So when it's indexed in the game, it actually plays correctly. However, the PlayStation version's track 02 is actually one of the in-game racing tracks for the Paradise track on Harpoon. And the menu track for the PlayStation version is actually track 16. That means if we were to launch the game as it was, it would actually play track 02 for the PlayStation version in the menus, not track 16, entirely throwing off the order of how the tracks should be placed. In order to fix this problem, we have to do just one little thing. Copy PS track 16.ogg from this line, remove it from that line, put an indent at the very top, and put track 16 at the top here, and save it. Now, when the game loads the m3u file, we can go in here. It'll see track 16 is actually at the top instead of track 02. Therefore, it will play track 16 instead of track 02 for the menus, and everything will be in the correct order. Now that that's done, you're pretty much done here. All you have to do is exit, go into your Rollcage Redux directory, and run the game. As you can see, we're hearing track 16 in the menu, which means that the cheat code is working properly. There's only one more thing that you need to do, is to actually input the cheat code for the game, which is bring back the old times. We'll enable it. You shouldn't have to enable it a second time. Even if you quit the game and load the game, once you inputted it the first time, it will remember the CD indexing for the PlayStation version. If you were to put the code in a second time, it would actually change the input to indexing back to the PC version soundtrack, which is important if you wanted to, say, switch the soundtrack back out for whatever reason it might be. So, now that that's working, I'm going to go ahead and load Harpoon. I'm going to load Daytona as one of the tracks. Now, if this track is working, it should actually play King of the Beats and not the track that plays on Paradise. as you can see, it's actually working like it's supposed to. So if this wasn't working, it would actually play track 02 instead of King of the Beats, which means that the indexing is still set to the PC version, in which case, if that was the case, you need to go back, type in bring back the old times, and make sure you hear that sound so that the indexing for the PlayStation version of the game is triggered. That's pretty much it. At this point, everything should be working as it should, and every track in the game will play the correct track as it was in the PlayStation version of the game. Alright, so this is like the 4th or 5th time that I've recorded just this section of the video, because every time I'd go to record it, it would come across some problem with the game audio not being picked up, or my controller's input not being recognized, or something stupid like that. So ignore the different backgrounds, it's part of the same video. Just wanted to go over real quick how to do the same process for Rollcage Extreme. Now the process is entirely the same. You do the exact same thing, just put your Rollcage Stage II disc into your computer, rip the CD soundtrack off of Rollcage Stage II into WAV format, convert it to OGG format, and then rename those files and put them in your music directory. Rollcage Extreme directory layout is pretty much the exact same as Rollcage Redux. All you have to do is double click IDX data, go into music tracks here, and then drop all of your OGGs that you converted here. Make a backup of the music file and name it accordingly, and then open your music.m3u file and put in all of your PS1 tracks into this m3u file so that they get indexed. Now, with Rollcage Redux, we had to take the last line and put it at the top for the index. In Rollcage Extreme, this is not necessary. You see, when you go into the game and load up the game, when you're listening to the PC soundtrack, it'll actually reference track 05 for the menu, which is Snar Nation. Now, if you index the tracks like this in order and go into Rollcage Extreme, you'll hear track 05 from the PlayStation version. You type in the bring back the old times cheat code in there, go into a race, exit that race, and go back to the main menu. If the cheat code's working, it'll actually play track 02 instead, which is Breakbeat Generation, the instrumentals mix, which is the menu track that plays in the PS1 version of the game. That way you know it's working. So that step that we did in Redux is totally unnecessary here. Just put the index here for the m3u file in order as you rip the tracks off of the disk, save the file, and then go in to Rollcage Extreme and start the game. Now mine is already set up. My bring back the old times cheat code is active, so when we start the game we should hear Breakbeat Generation. As you can see, we can hear Breakbeat Generation working right here, so it's good. Now we're going to go into a race. I'm going to go into Renegade, and if this is working, we should hear the track Control by Aquasky, which is a track that plays on this track in the PS1 version. As you can see, it's working perfectly fine. That's pretty much the end of that tutorial, so thank you for watching. If you in any way found this tutorial useful or helpful, feel free to give me a like and a subscribe in any way. I really do appreciate it, and if you enjoy this stuff, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'm really interested in trying to get old games work. It's kind of what I do a lot of time on my off time and whatnot. I had uploaded a video of getting The Sims 2 to work on PC with DG Voodoo 2, so if that's something you're interested in, feel free to check that out as well. And other than that, thank you for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day.